Welcome to the Hard Things About IP, where we dive into the world of intellectual property and the hard things about it with experts from various industries. Today, I am joined by Christina Wainikka, an experienced, I would say, IP professional / expert that I admire on what she has done. And when I looked at her LinkedIn, it was so long of what she has been doing. And we hopefully today can dive into her journey. Hopefully she can share some insights and challenges and also some thoughts on the future of IP. But let's jump right into it. So, to kick things off, Christina, could you briefly introduce yourself, who you are, and what you're currently working on?
Currently, I'm working as a policy expert at the Confederation of Swedish Enterprise, Svenskt Näringsliv in Swedish. And that also means that I'm involved in the work of Business Europe, because Business Europe is an umbrella organization for organizations like Confederation of Swedish Enterprise, but from 36 different countries. And coming into that, I do have a background both as a legal researcher and as an entrepreneur.
Out of curiosity, what led you to specialize in intellectual property, and specifically, was it a particular moment or project that sparked your interest in the field?
It was, and I can almost, define the moment, and if I would be able to find timetable and schedule for my first term studying law in Uppsala, I could spot the lesson where my interest was sparked. Because during that first course, I had a teacher who was very much interested in intellectual property, and she was brilliant in all different topics, but when it came to intellectual property, there was a little bit more of this spark. And we came about to have a discussion because she was working with research on services and service companies. So I started to think about service innovation. And I got so upset by the fact that you can't patent service innovations. And actually that led to that I wrote my final paper at the education to get my law degree on service innovation and IP. So it was a very specific moment where I really found that this is the most interesting thing of all.
Okay. And obviously, as you mentioned, you are working in various parts of the IP space, and you described a little bit your current role and what you're doing. Do you see yourself more as an advisor, strategist, or something else entirely? How do you see yourself as?
I would say in my current role, I am more of a strategist with a helicopter view. So that is my assignment. So previously I've been working more with giving advice, being the one discussing with different companies on how they should, act and behave. But in my current role, I do not give advice in specific cases. So if anyone wants to discuss a specific case, I point at others. But what I do is to make sure that the companies in Sweden and Europe have access to a well-functioning system, which means perhaps develop legislation in some cases, or how the offices are working, but also other things on sort of the more political side. How is IP handled in public procurement, for example, or is there anything we need to change when it comes to legislation due to emerging technologies? So that type of overarching strategic questions, that's where I am currently. So not as an advisor, not down to earth, but up in the clouds discussing at the large levels.
And given that you have been working for so many years, right, in this specific topic, and I can imagine that you're wearing different hats. What does a typical week look like for you? When you go in there, Monday morning, you grab your coffee. Can you give us some insights?
But the fact is that there is absolutely no normal week. So a normal week that doesn't happen. I think I grabbed my first Monday morning coffee at the office for several weeks yesterday. But normally I travel a lot and I do so many different things. And even within a day, as you said, I change hats. Sometimes I lecture at different universities, sometimes I'm leading roundtable discussions, sometimes I'm traveling. So the last 2 weeks I've been traveling quite a lot. So I was at the IP5 meeting in Tianjin in China 2 weeks ago. And last week, most of the week was spent in Alicante at UIPO for their management and budget committees, management board and budget committees. So there are absolutely no typical standard week.
Was expecting that answer. I'm not surprised that you have a week that consists of different things. I mean, this is what happens. The more senior you get in what you do, the more people want, obviously, your attention. Maybe for the ones that are not so familiar with our space, what is IP5? And maybe you can give some content to our audience.
Yes, IP5 is a meeting with the 5 most important IP offices on the patent side in the world. So you have EPO, of course, representing Europe. You have USPTO representing the US. And then you also have the Chinese office, the South Korean office, and the Japanese office. And they have meetings once a year. And they discuss practical issues down to, for example, what is allowed when it comes to the drawings in patent applications, so that can be harmonized, which might, for people not working with patents, it might sound as a really small and not important topic. So do we allow colors, for example? So I tried to explain to my husband, so I'm going to China to discuss whether you can have colors in drawings or not. And, you know, like he said, are you really traveling to China for that? But when it comes to the practical side on patents, having differences on what is allowed when it comes to the drawings, that is a driver for costs. And it does make the patent system less accessible to different kinds of users. So it is an important question. So those are some kinds of issues being discussed. There is also always a strategic topic. I was also in the meeting in Seoul last year in South Korea. There, the strategic topics was on SMEs, and on IP5 webpage there is now a report on what the different offices do to facilitate for SMEs, which is a very good overview on different efforts by the different offices. This year, the strategic topic was linked to utilization and commercialization of innovation through patents. So we're focusing more on the commercialization side of the patent system. So the IP5 discussion club for the different offices. And these 5 offices, you might consider that it's just 5 offices of many more offices in the world. But they do represent, I think, something between 80 and 90% of the patent applications in the world. So they are really, really important and setting the standard for the patent system. And I was there as a representative for industry because it is the heads of office and industry meeting. So I was there representing Business Europe, and as the Confederation of Swedish Enterprise is a part of Business Europe, I was also representing the Confederation of Swedish Enterprise.
Wow, super, super interesting. Before we jump into a little bit and talking about the bigger picture on IP, I attended on one of your presentation, and you told us, at least you informed us, that you have actually done and become an Iron Man / Iron Lady, I recall.
Yeah, it's true. I have a fascination for doing things that I absolutely cannot do and try to learn it. So I have done 3 Ironman, 2 in Kalmar and 1 in Copenhagen. And Ironman, for those of you who don't know it, it's a service innovation for the first important part. So I actually have written about it from an IP perspective as well. But Ironman is 3.6 kilometers of swimming, 3.8 kilometers of swimming, and then you bike for 180 kilometers, and then you run a full marathon. And it is something that one thing I like about doing an Ironman is that you have to set a goal and you have to plan and be strategic on when should I rest, when should I train what, and so on. But I also have a background as a power lifter, and so I have a national silver medal from national championship in bench press. And the thing is about being impossible, I am too tall to be a good powerlifter, but still managed to perform. And when it comes to triathlon, I'm actually too heavy, but I've still done it. And there is a triathlon cup in Sweden, and some years ago I came second in the triathlon cup for my age group. So doing impossible things, trying to find out how I can do the impossible is something I find very intriguing and interesting.
I love it. I love it. And I think that's also a little bit how people in the IP space are, that we do things that nobody really understand and believe in, but we always think things are possible. I love it. It's so cool. So cool. Yeah. Let's touch a little bit now more on the bigger picture issues. So from your experience, what are the most common challenges that you see as a professional in general are faced with when it comes to IP strategy and the protection?
I would say that the most common misconception or problem is lack of knowledge. So a lot of people do not know enough on what they actually can do. So a lot of people don't understand how they can actually use intellectual property as a part of their overarching strategies. And they often leave the IP issues and the legal issues linked to the IP issues to some experts that are quite isolated. They are sitting on little islands trying to do what they think is the best thing. But when it comes to linking it to what the company actually desires and actually needs, it doesn't link in together. It doesn't become a strong chain of decisions in going in one direction. So I think that is the most important challenge. And I often meet even member companies saying things like, oh no, IP is not important to us. They say, for example, when it comes to service innovation, oh, but this is not patentable, therefore I don't have to do anything in the field of IP. And then they are missing out on opportunities on trademarks, on copyright, on trade secrets, on design protection, just because they have such a strong focus on it's just patents that are important. And even if you have a technical solution that you could patent, the other intellectual property rights could be really important in building a portfolio. And this also leads to a misconception, and that is the lack of understanding what you actually use the rights for. I gave a presentation at the IP5 meeting in Tianjin, and I approached this topic because we often discuss just about the intellectual property right as the exclusive right itself. Just focusing on how the exclusiveness provides an incentive for innovation and how you can use that exclusive right to get return on your investment in the research. So we focus on the exclusiveness, but what we then lack to talk about is, for example, how we actually often commercialize through the intellectual property right. That is the business model. So that is what we are handling in different ways. So we are selling the different intellectual property rights through licenses, for example. We also lack to discuss the importance of handling different intellectual property rights from the perspective as that is the tool to build collaboration. When we are collaborating with different actors, building that around the intellectual property rights and having that as the core of the agreements. If you want to use this intellectual property right of ours, we should be able to use that intellectual property right of yours, and we should behave in this specific way. That is also something that we do not talk about enough. And one more thing that we often fail to talk about and fail to address, and that is the fact that intellectual property rights and having them and handling them correctly is really important for investors. So we often talk about how it's difficult to attract investments when it comes to startups and scale-ups. And we don't talk about that the fact that if you do wrong things, or you make wrong decisions, or you don't make decisions at all about intellectual property rights in early stages, an investor coming in doing even a quick due diligence will find those mistakes. For example, who is the patent holder? Have we registered a trademark or not? Have we written the copyright agreements that we need in place? If those things are not there, they're not going to invest, because the investment is too much of a risk. And that is something we should address so much more. Not just talk about if you register your invention, you will get a patent and then everything is fine. That's too simplified on how describing the IP system.
Wow, I love it, Christina. And when you talk about these topics, do you see a difference between, because you touched upon startup and the SMEs, but if you see the whole ecosystem, you have the startups, the SMEs, and the large enterprises. Do you see a difference in how they approach IP, in your opinion? And if so, what's one piece of advice you could offer to each of these groups?
I say that there are many misconceptions among SMEs, among larger corporations, and I think one problem is that different parts of the operations don't talk enough with one another. So I meet sometimes SMEs that have both the perfect IP strategy, but it's also very closely linked to their business strategy. And I would like to give one example. This is not a member company, but very well known. For you, those of you who have seen the playlist available on, I think it's Netflix, on how Spotify was developed, because the handling of the intellectual property rights was part of building the business model, and how to also explain to everyone what are you actually paying for. And I advise everyone to look at the plate, especially part 3, which is the perspective where they discuss the legal side and the IP side of building that business model. But sometimes I also meet, of course, we have members that are world class on using intellectual property rights. We have many large corporations as members. And if you would write a textbook on how could you use intellectual property rights, you would have them as your star example, because they're really top class, not just in Sweden, but also internationally. But I sometimes meet even large corporations that fail to do even the most simple things, like what they fail in could, for example, be applying for a trademark at the right stage. So they apply for a trademark too late. They've already started to talk about the trademarks and not protected it so someone else can take it, and then they have invested time and money in developing, having focusing groups, for example, discussing the trademark and coming to a decision. This is what we should do. And then they do not make the registration in time. So we see everything.
Super interesting. I was expecting somehow partial of that answer, but not also to see large corporations. It's interesting to see that. And as you said, it's so important that we work close to them, right? So we have to make sure that everybody's using IP in the right way. Now, to the next topic that is very close to my heart, obviously, is competitive intelligence, right? I mean, you went to China recently. You talked to these patent offices and the IP5, right? One of their role is obviously to publish data. I mean, that's the thing you have in the agreement, right? If you file a patent application, you can get an exclusivity, and in turn, they are allowed to publish the application. Likewise with trademarks, you can file for a trademark, and then somewhere down that path, the trademark will become public. How do you see that being used by companies? Again, to the same group we talked about, SMEs, large corporations. Are they using it strategically, or do we still need to educate them? And maybe the last insight you can maybe share is, what could the authorities do to make them aware of that the data is available?
And this is actually one of my favorite topics because there is so much more we could do, and at all different levels of society actually. Because as you said, one of the things with the patent system and the trademark and the design protection is that you do have a registered right, and those registers are to a large extent public. So anyone could go into the databases and try to search for information. And we should use it so much more. And I would start with the overarching perspective, and that is from a country perspective. In Sweden, we don't really use that type of information when we are thinking about where should we invest money on research, for example. So we do spend a lot of time and money on research that if we would have used patent information in a better way, we would have found that someone else had already done the research and patented it somewhere in the world. So instead of that, a researcher comes up with a great idea, they apply for research funding, and they do get the research funding, and then in the end, when they say, oh, this is a clever idea, perhaps we could patent, then someone is looking into the patent databases and do find that you cannot get a freedom to operate, because in fact what you have been doing research on is already researched and patented by someone else. And I think that is, as you can hear, that really makes me upset, because we do not have actually, what I would say, we cannot spend people's time and money on research that has already been done. And we have very good examples from around the world where they have, within their research policy from the government side, use patent information. They do it in Norway, they do it in Canada, they do it in Singapore. And we should really start doing that ourselves, instead of just discussing how can we invest more in research. We should make sure that we invest in the right research, and one way to start is to use patent information better. So one way where we should use patent information better is to make sure that we do not invest in research that has already been done. But also, if researchers were trained in using the patent databases, they could use that as an inspiration for the research, because that is perfectly allowed. The patent system is constructed for using the patent databases for inspiration. So we should train the researchers in doing that, looking into the patent databases. So that is one side of it. And then, of course, we do have the same sort of problem when it comes to companies, because a lot of companies do not also use the patent databases the way they could. So they could do a lot more in investigating where is, things happening, where is the industry going, where are competitors going, what are their field of interest, and so on. And you could do that quite a lot when looking into the patent databases. And another thing that I think for companies, they should be also aware of that others look into the patent databases and do analysis of the company based on what we see and find in the patent databases. We had a discussion, we were at a meeting, at a member company, and they were giving a presentation on their company, and they described how important their patent portfolio was. And of course, being who I am, at the meeting, I picked up my phone, I went into the database and started searching what patents do they have? What is the situation with the patent portfolio? And I discovered that all their patents were going to expire in 5 years. So I would have liked to hear the presentation, how are we going to handle the fact that all our patents are going to expire within 5 years? Because if I would have been an investor or anything else, that's the information that I want. Not that saying, oh, we have a great business model, we have all these patents. Because if they're all going to expire within that short time frame, we do have a problem.
You said many wise things, and I think I share the same frustration as you, Christina. We really need to do something about it. But that's a reality we are all faced with, right? I mean, they are not using it in the way that they could actually benefit out of that type of information. I completely support you there. Switching over to another very hot topic nowadays. It's AI and the digital transformation, right? And you know, the world of IP is changing super fast. You know, when I joined the Swedish Patent Office to become a patent engineer, my mentor told me that when he joined the Swedish Patent Office in the 80s, they received once a week a big container with all the patent that has been published, you know, and then that was the data that they received. So whenever he had to examine, he had to go through them paper-wise. And when that was done, he was done, right? But, you know, now with these connectivities we have around us, things are changing. And my question is more now, how do you see AI will shape the future of IP management? And obviously, do you think that it will maybe help us to give access to this enormous information so companies can use it in a different way?
And I think there are probably a lot of things that are going to change with AI, also within the offices, and how users perhaps can use the databases at the offices in different ways. And I would say from the offices side, this has been a topic for discussion at the IP5 meeting in Seoul last year. We discussed AI and how the patent offices are using AI. It was also discussed in Tianjin in China this year. So the patent offices are really looking into how can they use AI to facilitate, to speed up different processes and so on. And there might also be some challenges linked to that. Perhaps we could see a rise of number of applications. Due to that, we might have AI drafted applications, so they might flood the system. That's one concern that has been raised. And I can also mention that also at the management board committee at the UIPO, there was also discussion on AI in the role of the offices. But I think at the moment, I think it's really important to have the discussion. I think it's really crucial that we do discuss how can we use it, how can it be used as a tool to facilitate for users, facilitate for the offices, and so on. But I think it is almost impossible to today see how new technologies are going to change our worlds. And I think that it is the case when it comes to AI overall. We published a report in 2023 on digital innovation and digital innovation processes. So from business perspective, what are the challenges? And we released it in Swedish in February and in English in December, and had to rewrite it because the technical development is so fast. But I think it's important to sort of remember that we are really in the early stages. We use it as a tool. I had an intern this spring that did a project for us at the Confederation of Swedish Enterprise on legal tech. How can we perform better by using legal tech, for example? But I do think it's really difficult to see where technology brings us. And I have two favorite examples. And one is perhaps not something that sounds very nice, but for example, when the bike came to the northern parts of Sweden. In the northern parts of Sweden, you know, the distances to transport yourself, that they're quite big. But when the bike came, it was easier to transport yourself. That actually led to decrease of inbreed. And who would have thought that a bike, having more bikes in the northern parts of Sweden, would influence something like the inbreed in isolated villages? Another favorite example of mine is digital photography. Because when I bought my first digital camera, I behaved in exactly the same way as I did with my ordinary camera. Which means that I took the pictures, I sent them to do an online service where I could get them printed, and then I got them by mail at home, and then I put them into albums. So I behaved just like the technical advancement had been before that, even though I had this new technology. What I failed to understand was how the access to digital photography would change so many other things. For example, thanks to digital photography, I think this is really a crucial part for the development of social media, for example. So the fact that we have Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat, that is thanks to digital photography. And who would have thought at the time when I was standing there with my digital camera, and my only perspective was that I am behaving the same way. I'm ordering prints and putting them into albums, and I failed to see the development of Snapchat and TikTok. And I think that is where we are now when it comes to AI. We use AI to simplify reading large text masses, so we make a summary for me, or we make nice pictures with ChatGPT now, like these little action dolls that I'm sure everyone has been seeing. But we are not really grasping how will this in the long run change how we behave, and that we do not see. And I think that is also difficult to see now for the offices. They can understand that things are going to change, and they need to discuss that things are going to change, but exactly how is really difficult to grasp.
Wow, this was very nice, and I think the examples you just read, I can confirm. I think I have done the same, most probably with the digital camera. Yeah, that's a good one, very good one. And now, if I continue here. If you were about to invent an AI-powered legal tool that would make your IP work or vision easier and smarter, what would it do? Be super creative now, super creative.
I would actually, if it comes to digital tools, I would use them to address the main challenge. So use it to smarter ways to describe what you can do with IP for those who lack knowledge and lack understanding on how they can use IP. I would actually put my main efforts there, because when it comes to both the offices, they know a lot of things. They're really smart people, and the advisor side also full of really, really smart people. So we actually need to target the ones that lack knowledge and lack understanding. So how we can use AI to enhance that would be where I would put my effort. But how? I don't know. That I would have to think about.
Well, nevertheless, I hope that some of the entrepreneurs out there in the legal tech heard your new future tool, and hopefully they can help us to create it, because that is quite interesting what you just said. To bridge the gap, right? To enable companies to see the opportunity in that. I love it. So entrepreneurs out there, haven't you done it or not doing it, look into it, how we can do it. And you most probably can check with Christina if this is something that is right when you have created your MVP. So to go further down the road now, I want to focus a little bit on you now. A lot of people say they fell into IP as a career. And I can tell you, I did that. It was never a plan I had when I was becoming an electrical engineer at KTH. It came later on down the road. What would you say to someone who's thinking about entering this field, whether it's, strategic consulting or patent attorney or patent engineer or IP attorney? What would it be?
Say that start thinking and breathing IP. Because one thing that I like about IP is when I think of everything that I think is interesting and fun and what makes my heart go a little bit faster, there is a link on IP. So try and see the IP around you, identify the trademarks, think about the technical solutions, do use the databases and look into how many different patents that this and this company have, for example. Go into the different offices and look at their different dashboards with statistics. And try to discover the world of IP, and soon you are going to be intrigued enough to see that there is something here that I want to work with. So if I understand this, I could help these companies in this way, and so on. So start thinking IP, because that would also make you better at understanding how you could actually use IP. So that's where I would start. And for me, from one perspective, you could say that looking back on my career, it might seem like I had a focus and a sort of a straight line, this is what I'm going to do. But for me, it was always IP as a core. So I did the doctorate degree after having finished my law degree. And that was really based on passion. I really wanted to do research. And when that, I went out working more as a counselor, and after that going out working as an entrepreneur, the core was always, what can I do with this? And I think this, what can I do with it? That has always been sort of my core question. How can I use it? What can I do with it? And that is also what I do now as a policy expert. What are the implications? How can we use it? And how can I describe that to, for example, policymakers making decisions, for example, on financing research and where they should use patent information better, for example. So try to find what drives you, what is interesting for you. I would start there, and to discuss with interesting people.
Fair enough. Obviously, you touched upon already a movie. I was very happy about it because that's usually one of the toughest questions I realize when I speak to experts in the space. So obviously, you mentioned the one movie that has somehow IP as part of the storyline. Is there another movie or TV show that you think, hey, that's actually kind of accurate, or is it the only one you can come up with that you mentioned?
I'd say one of the things that I like about Disney is how they work with IP from a strategic standpoint, and also the fact that they're using the fact that old works in copyright enter into public domain. So they're based on old tales, and then they elaborate it and they make it into their own creation, their own work, and then they use those rights in different ways with all the merchandise and so on. So look at really good Disney movies in different versions. On the plane from China, for example, I looked at the latest version of Cinderella. And we have seen several different versions, but they're still elaborating it. They're still taking it to new things, using the IP system, both what has been into public domain and how they can bring it forward. So I think those are really good examples. Oh, and one more example for and that I really like, and that is on Swedish television. There is a series on Alfred Nobel and his family. And of course, he was a really famous inventor, and he did have a lot of patents. So I think that is interesting as well.
Very good one. I hope there are English subtitles for the ones, or is it in English? I'm not so sure, but hopefully there should be some subtitles. But Christina, I don't know how to thank you so much for taking the time. I know you are a super busy person. This has been a fantastic conversation, and you have given me so many ideas already. I will reach out to you separately. But thank you so much for your insights and experiences on the hard things about IP. And it has been a pleasure having you on the podcast. That's it for today's episode of The Hard Things About IP. If you have enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe for more conversations with IP professionals. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.